with love that casts out fear, with hope to trust tomorrow. We accept this day as the gift it is, a reason for rejoicing. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here. Okay.
Good morning. I'm here with our chalice lighter, and this is Finn Mannix. He's going to help me today. Can you say that again?
Hello.
Okay, good. Can't turn this over there, but welcome this morning. I wanted to have a short reading here from our own hymnal, and it's about the match that lights our flame. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the heart's secret place. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. You ready?
Give a round of applause. We love our chalice lighters. Thank you so much. Once again, welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. So glad you are here with us this morning. We are so glad also about the folks joining us from home. Welcome also. There's so much good stuff going on here at West Shore. Check out the West Shore Weekly as an insert in your order of service. I think there's another insert in there as well about Going Home, a really, really cool event. Want you to take a look at that. All sorts of things. Find out how you can get involved here at West Shore. Aren't these Christmas trees lovely? Aren't they great? Aren't they great? Yeah. Yeah, sure. But you might want to hold on to that applause because I want to say a couple of few words. I want to say thanks to our aesthetics team led by Jerry Devis. They coordinated the efforts of our councils, of the finance committee in creating each of these trees. I invite you to come up after the service and check these trees out. And what you'll see are different aspects of our mission. That's what each of these trees represents. So there's $100 bills on this tree. That's the finance committee, right? Can you tell? And hearts here, and right, rainbow flag here, justice, and this is caring and community. This is our music program, worship and arts. So now you can give them a round of applause. It's just lovely. Yeah. So I want to invite each of us to share this warmth, to greet each other warmly. If you have not seen someone, met someone before, go ahead and say hello to them and strike up a conversation and maybe offer the folks at home a little wave. Let's greet each other right now. We come to this good morning, remembering the journey of freedom. The land we are on was once another's. We mourn the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all. On Thanksgiving Sunday, just a few weeks ago, we spoke of the abundance that we are able to generate when we come together around the same table. For our bread communion, we invited people to bring bread that represents their heritage in some way. And all of this bread after the service was set up as a feast in Baker Hall afterwards. And I want you to take a look at some of these pictures. That's Irish soda bread. Look at that big old long table. That's like rice cake. What is that? Say it again, loud. Biko, yeah. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And all I want to say this morning as our offering today, as the call to offering, is may we continue to strengthen this community with our gifts of time and energy and money. The stronger our community is, the more it can support us as individuals and families, and it helps us to be the best we can be. So right now, the offering will be given and very gratefully received.
This is a reading from Braiding Sweetgrass, of course, and these are the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer. And just briefly, I want to say how much I love this book. So she says, when I ask my elders about the ways our people lived in order to keep the world whole and healthy, I hear the mandate to take only what you need. But we human people, descendants of Nana Bojo, struggle as he did with self-restraint. The dictum to take only what you need leaves a lot of room for interpretation when our needs get so tangled with our wants. This gray area yields then to a rule more primal than need, an old teaching nearly forgotten now in the din of industry and technology. Deeply rooted in cultures of gratitude, this ancient rule is not just to take only what you need, but to take only what is given. At the level of human interactions, we already do this. It's what we teach our kids. If you're visiting your sweet grandma and she offers you homemade cookies on her favorite china plate, you know what to do. You accept them with many thank yous and cherish the relationship reinforced by cinnamon and sugar. You gratefully take what has been given, but you wouldn't dream of breaking into her pantry and just taking all the cookies and even her favorite plate without any invitation. That would be, at a minimum, a breach of good manners, a betrayal of the loving relationship you have with your grandma. She would be heartbroken and not inclined to bake more cookies for you anytime soon. As a culture, though, we seem unable to extend these good manners to the natural world. The dishonorable harvest has become a way of life. We take what doesn't belong to us and destroy it beyond repair. For example, Onondaga Lake, the Alberta tar sands, the rainforests of Malaysia, and the list is endless. They are gifts from our sweet grandmother Earth, which we take without asking. How do we find the honorable harvest again?
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. And now you are invited to come forward to share from the heart. These are the joys and sorrows of our hearts, which I will take into my meditations and pray for all that is our life.
For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Well, I'll tell you what, the big voice of American dominant culture is more than ready to tell us. It is more than ready. It tells us that the status quo is just fine. It tells us that humanity is broken and the world would be far better off without us. And you heard me right. The big voice, it shouts out of both sides of its mouth. The big voice declares one thing, and then in the same moment it turns right around and declares the opposite. Take the status quo is just fine pronouncement. Now this refers to how people generally know that you can't treat other people as things. When you are dealing with people, there must be respect. But if it is things we are talking about, well, you can do what you want with those things, and the only constraint is whether those things belong to some other person. You just can't take another person's things. As we heard Robin Wall Kimmerer affirm a moment ago, if you are visiting your sweet grandma and she offers you some homemade cookies on her favorite china plate, you know what to do. You gratefully take what has been given, but you would not dream of breaking into her pantry and taking all of her cookies without invitation, grabbing her china plate for good measure. It's what we teach our kids, she says. Thus the big voice pronounces the status quo is just fine. But side by side with this comes a radically opposite judgment from this very same big voice. Robin Wall Kimmerer has heard it channeled through her college students over and over again, as when they declare that there are no beneficial relationships between people and the land. She has heard it channeled through her scientific colleagues who communicate what she calls the Western scientific worldview. And she says it sets human beings outside of nature and judges their interactions with other species as largely negative. They, she says of her science colleagues, had been schooled that the best way to protect a dwindling species was to leave it alone and keep people away. But perhaps this side of the big voice of dominant American culture is most clearly communicated through such things as a 2007 nonfiction book by Alan Wiseman entitled The World Without Us. How many of you have read that book or seen it? The World Without Us. It is about what would happen to the world if humans suddenly disappeared. The not so subtly implied message is really this: humans are a toxic virus, and it is best for Mother Earth if her human children vanished. That is actually the rallying cry of the voluntary human extinction movement. How many of you have heard about that movement? The voluntary human extinction movement. It was founded by Les Knight in 1991, and it's essentially a group of folks who believe that the best thing humans can do to help the earth is to stop having children. I got my work cut out for me, right? This is the start of the sermon, Howard, not the end, right? So just let's see where you are by the end. Yeah. A recent New York Times article on this movement helps to explain, and I quote, "Mr. Knight added the word voluntary decades ago to make it clear that adherents to this movement do not support mass murder, they do not support forced birth control, nor do they encourage suicide. Their ethos is echoed in their motto, which is, 'May we live long and die out.'" And in another one of their slogans, which Mr. Knight hangs at various conventions and street fairs, "Thank you for not breeding." Okay. So there you have it. The big voice, speaking, screaming opposite things out of both sides of its mouth. And we are caught up in its whiplash effects. We are. One moment, humanity is all right. Next moment, humanity is all wrong. But you know, that's the big voice. What might we be learning from the little voices coming into us from the margins? Braiding Sweetgrass, that book, Braiding Sweetgrass, if it is anything, it summons up these little voices for us to finally hear so that we are less entranced by the big voices' confusing shouts. The little voices, they arrive as questions. As in, how do we find the honorable harvest again? Or how do we make our relations with the world sacred again? Or how do we consume in a way that does justice to the lives we take? Such questions indeed imply that we are in a very bad time, that the honorable harvest is lost, and people take more than what they need and take way beyond what they are given, that our relations with the non-human world are blasphemous, a desecration, a defilement, that humans are a part of the circle of life, and life must feed on life to survive, but human consumption patterns are deeply disrespectful of this. The little voices concur. The times are perilous indeed. But look a little closer at these questions. All of them also imply the possibility of repentance. They also imply the possibility of repair, restoration, return. There is hopefulness here. If insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, the little voices suggest that there actually is a way out of that. Those many questions that I put out there, they really add up to one question. How can the world be made whole again, including us? Sorry, Howard. Including us. Oh, that was actually a joke. You should have. Including Howard, including us. Yes. How can the world be made whole again, including us? Not the world without us, not voluntary human extinction, but neither the status quo is just fine. Not that either. There must be change. And part of the change is to acknowledge that, yes, there really are positive human interactions with the natural world. Kimmerer offers example after example of this. And so she says, for example, the grassy meadows tell us that for sweetgrass, human beings are a part of the system, a vital part. Humans participate in a symbiosis in which sweetgrass provides its fragrant blades to the people, and people, by harvesting, create the conditions for sweetgrass to flourish. Or she notes this: corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters. They are fully domesticated. They rely on us to create the conditions under which they can grow. We too are part of this reciprocity. They can't meet their responsibilities unless we meet ours. Perhaps we should consider this a four sisters garden, for the planter is also an essential partner. And on and on, on and on. Part of the change is to disbelieve the big voice's absolute negativity regarding human interactions with the land. Positive interactions have existed in our past. They are demonstrated at the very least by Kimmerer's native ancestors and their ancient land practices. And they point the way to a possible renaissance of that. Part of the change is at least to recognize this. But there must be more change. Change which is radical. Radical means get to the root. The change must be radical. Now, what is that going to be about? Well, stick with me for part 2. It came to me while I was picking beans, says Robin Wall Kimmerer. It came to me, the secret of happiness. She says, I was hunting among the spiraling vines that envelop my teepees of pole beans, lifting the dark green leaves to find handfuls of pods, long and green, firm and furred with tender fuzz. I snapped them off where they hung in slender twosomes, bit into one, and I tasted nothing but August. August, distilled into pure, crisp beaniness. Maybe it was the smell of ripe tomatoes, or the oriole singing, or that certain slant of light on a yellow afternoon and the beans hanging thickly around me. It just came to me in a wash of happiness. And it made me laugh out loud, startling the chickadees who were picking at the sunflowers. I knew it with a certainty as warm and clear as the September sunshine. The land loves us back. She loves us with beans and tomatoes, with roasting ears and blackberries and bird songs, and that's her story. What Robin Wall Kimmerer calls her epiphany in the beans. And it's a well-chosen word, epiphany. That word, epiphany, it is a religious term, which means the showing forth of or the manifestation of the divine. That is what an epiphany is. There, surrounded by beings, the love that humanity has for her and for all. That love was distinctly and clearly made manifest to her. And it made her happy indeed. That she experienced this epiphany is even more remarkable when we remember the dominant Western culture worldview within which we all function, her included. This big voice worldview envisions humanity as simultaneously exceptional and damned. Humans are exceptional because we are the only people, meaning we are the only ones with spirit and intelligence. And therefore we are damned. Therefore we are damned. We are damned by existing in a natural world environment that has no spirit or intelligence that might answer back to humanity's own. We are lonely. And the landscape that surrounds us is alien to us, hostile even. So that for us to survive, we must master the natural world. We must take from it whatever we can get. Our human selfishness is as much our suffering as it is our survival strategy. Let me say that again. Our selfishness is as much our suffering as it is our survival strategy. This is fundamentally what needs changing. The fundamental task, the radical task, is to reimagine our essential human situation and to act accordingly. To realize that we humans are neither exceptional nor damned. To acknowledge that the non-human world has personhood, even though that personhood may appear very different from human personhood. To affirm that really and truly, that the land loves us with its own distinctive love language. Now, I know you might have heard the book, The 5 Love Languages. Well, Kimmerer is saying that the land has its own love language. And we need to learn how to honor that love language and to show our love back. I mean, what will it take for us, here and now, to have our own personal epiphany in the beans? What will it take? Now, Robin Wall Kimmerer is perfectly aware that to say such a thing, to say the land really does love us, well, it's going to raise some questions. She says, I once sat in a graduate writing workshop on relationships with the land. The students all demonstrated a deep respect and affection for nature. They said that nature was the place where they experienced their greatest sense of well-being and belonging. They professed without reservation that they loved the earth. And then I asked them, well, do you think the earth loves you back? No one was willing to answer that one. That's what she says. It was as if I had brought a two-headed porcupine into the classroom. Unexpected, prickly. They backed slowly away. And that's what she says. If you were asked that question, what would your response be? Are you right now backing slowly away? Are you just right now backing slowly away from that two-headed porcupine? I mean, for myself, I want to believe. I want to believe that the land truly loves me. I want to believe for all sorts of reasons which are pragmatic. For if I believe that the land loves me, that it really does have its own kind of personhood and love language, then it becomes a they. Do you get me? Then it becomes a they. Plants and animals are no longer things to which I can do whatever I want without regard for their own dignity or desires. And I tell you what, the intellectual and emotional reset that follows from this insight is global. It touches everything. For one thing, it really does lead to a return to the honorable harvest. What's that? Well, essentially the main ethic of that is just taking what you need. And in fact, more than that, it is taking only what you are given and never stealing. And you don't want to steal, because it is disgusting to steal from beings who love you. It is disgusting. It's like stealing from your grandma. Disgusting. It also leads to a reestablishment of sacred relations with the earth. And principally, this means a constant honoring of the plant and animal lives we must consume so that we might live. For if such lives feel love for us and give themselves to us as gifts, then our consumption must be respectful. It must be spiritual. She says the exchange of a life for a life, the endless cycling between my body and the body of the world becomes finally seen in all its fullness as the sacrifice of people, non-human people, yes, but people nevertheless. She says killing a who demands something completely different from killing an it. I want to suggest 3 things that you might do to help yourself have your own epiphany in the beans. 3 things. Now, last month, I suggested the value of developing a gratitude practice. For this month, here are 3 things for you to consider doing. Number one is to decenter the big voice and its depressing perspective on the essential human condition. Perhaps the myths that Kimmerer draws on, that she shares throughout the course of her book, those myths from her native heritage, perhaps that can be medicine to help us. So we want to turn up the volume of these little voices. Take the indigenous creation myth, for example. In the beginning, sky woman, she falls from heaven in a beam of light She falls. The animals below her in the darkness, they catch her. They care for her. They make for her a home of mud on the back of the great turtle. And she reciprocates. She reciprocates with the bundle of seeds that she carries in her hands. These seeds, she scatters them on the new ground and carefully tends the plants until the world turns from brown to green. Sunlight streaming down through the hole in the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, medicines spread everywhere. Do you see how love, though, is at the center of that? Love is at the center of that story. Sky Woman is met by animals with loving care, and she reciprocates with loving care. And out of such love, says the myth, comes everything. That is the creation. Love. Love shared. Love reciprocated. The number one thing to do is to soften that big voice and turn up the volume of the little voices. Reading Kimmerer, just doing that, is turning up the volume of the little voices. Number two thing to do. Number two is to engage reason. How might it be reasonable to say that the non-human natural world has its own kind of personhood, which is different from human personhood? Now, I'm about to share with you some things that Robin Wall Kimmerer says, but I can just tell you personally, I own 2 cats, and those cats have spirit and intelligence. Let me tell you, right? If you have relationships with animals, you know there's personhood there. But here's what Robin Wall Kimmerer says. She says, what if you were a teacher, but you had no voice to speak your knowledge? What if you had no language at all, and yet there was something you needed to say? Wouldn't you dance it out? Wouldn't your every movement try to tell that story? In time, you would be so eloquent that just to gaze upon you would reveal it all. And so it is with these silent green lives, these plants. Plants, she says, speak in a tongue that every breathing thing can understand. Plants teach in a universal language, and that language is food. Food. That's the love language, food. Kimmerer then says, humans and the land are linked in a co-evolutionary circle. The sweeter the peach, the more frequently we disperse the seeds, nurture its young, and protect them from harm. Food plants and people act as selective forces on each other's evolution. The thriving of one is in the best interest of the other. And this, she says, this to me sounds a lot like love. A lot like love. What do you think? Finally, the number 3 thing to do. And I'm going to call it this: practice re-enchanting the world. She doesn't use that language, but that's how I would name it. Practice re-enchanting the world. What would it be like, Kimmerer wonders, to live with a heightened sensitivity to the lives given for ours? To consider the tree in the Kleenex, the algae in the toothpaste, the oaks in the floor, the grapes in the wine. To follow back, she says, the thread of life in everything, to follow it back, to pay it respect. She says, once you start, it is hard to stop, and you begin to feel yourself awash in gifts. she says, I greet you, jar of jam. In her cupboard, she opens up her cupboard. She says, I greet you, jar of jam. You, glass, who was once sand on the beach, washed back and forth and bathed in foam and seagull cries, but who are formed into glass until you once again return to the sea. And you, berries, plump in your Juneness, in the month of June, Juneness, now in my February pantry. And you, sugar, so far away from your Caribbean home, thanks for making the trip. And then Kimmerer says, in that awareness, looking over the objects on my desk, the basket, the candle, the paper, I delight in following their origins back to the ground. This is the heightened sensitivity that helps us re-enchant the world and save it from the appearance of utter deadness. We struggle with this constantly. Kimmerer rightly says, we have constructed an artifice, a Potemkin village of an ecosystem where we perpetuate the illusion that the things we consume have just fallen off the back of Santa's sleigh, not been ripped from the earth. The illusion enables us to imagine that the only choices we have are between brands. The third thing to do, then, is to take an active delight in following the things that we consume, the things we use, back to the ground, back to the source. Everything you see, follow it back to the source. And then to live in gratitude for this, to realize that our human lives are possible only because of the gracious gift of the land, that the land's gifts are gifts of grace, unearned by us. Gifts of grace, gifts of grace. Let us accept graciously, with gratitude, with respect. It is the secret of happiness. So may it be. Let it be so. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. Loves eternity. So many theologies see this eternal love coming from somewhere else, some supernatural place or plane, some god, some goddess living elsewhere. But what if the land really does love us? Love us with food that it gives so graciously, and maybe in other ways. What about this different theology? I invite you this day to let that different theology inside you, work inside you, stir inside you. See where it takes you. At the very least, to be as if with it, as if, live as if the Lamb loved you. See where that takes you. And then reciprocate. Love the Lamb back. Love your life. Let it be so. I feel